Thank you. Thank you, Board Chair Piasecki, Father Carroll, President Emeritus Sundborg, Provost Martin, members of the Seattle University Board of Trustees, faculty, students, staff, and administration, alumni and friends, distinguished colleagues and visitors from other universities, civic leaders. It's a great honor and privilege to be with you here today and to formally accept the responsibility of leading this remarkable academic community. Before I begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank the many people, faculty and staff, members of the Seattle University community, the broader Seattle community, who've welcomed me since my arrival in July, who've worked so hard to make this event possible, even in the face of all of the uncertainty presented by COVID. I'm especially grateful to the Inauguration Oversight and Planning Committee, and particularly Michael Flores, Lizetta Solaric, and Julie Brady in the University Advancement Office for all the time and thought that they've put into this inauguration ceremony. Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge the members of my family, some of whom have traveled great distances or taken precious time off from work to be with us here today. I'd particularly like to thank my parents, who throughout my life have been models of faith and service to me and my siblings. And of course to my brilliant and beautiful wife, Professor Sheetal Kalantri, who has been my best friend and partner in life for 25 years. She inexplicably puts up with all of my shortcomings, including occasional lapses of memory. Inside joke for people at dinner last night. Seattle University is unique among the universities of the Pacific Northwest, and arguably in the country, unique even among the tightly knit community of Catholic and Jesuit colleges and universities. Unique in our very distinctive vision to become a university known for our innovative, progressive, Jesuit, and Catholic approach to higher education. That's quite a list of adjectives. Innovative, progressive, Jesuit, and Catholic. There's a little something there for everyone. Sometimes piling adjectives one on top of another shrinks a category to extinction. Is that what's happening here? Or is this a case where the sum of the terms yields a whole that's greater and more inclusive than its constituent parts? To my mind, exploring the union of these four adjectives that Seattle University has used to describe itself, innovative, progressive, Jesuit, and Catholic, is like navigating a labyrinth. Or more precisely, to borrow from Jorge Luis Borges, it's like navigating a labyrinth of labyrinths, a maze of mazes, a twisting, turning, ever-widening labyrinth that contains both past and future and somehow implies the stars. The key to ensuring that this evocative string of words becomes an ever-widening labyrinth rather than a narrowing intellectual cul-de-sac is the word I've omitted, the word that's most definitive of who we are: university. All these other words are simply attempts to describe the kind of university we aspire to be. In his justly famous discourses on the idea of a university, St. John Henry Newman said that a university is, at its essence, a place of teaching. If universities were first and foremost places of discovery and creation, he reasoned, then he couldn't understand why a university should have students. After all, research could certainly be more efficiently done without the distraction of teaching beginners. But the presence of students, and indeed the impossibility of imagining a university without students, suggests that students, and therefore teaching, belong at the very center of our self-understanding. Newman's argument always makes me reflect on a very prestigious endowed lecture I attended as a freshman in college. The distinguished scholar who was delivering the lecture and who will remain nameless began his talk by extolling the virtues of the Princeton Institute for Advanced Studies, where he happened to be in residence at the time. And in a room full of tuition-paying undergraduates, he praised the institute precisely because, and he said with a wide smile, and I quote, "there are no students there." If Newman was right, and if teaching students is the purest distillation of the university's purpose, it doesn't follow that the production of scholarship or creative works is without importance. One of the things that we're teaching our students to become is creators of knowledge. And so producing superb scholarship and including our students in that process is really vital to our educational mission. Now, not all universities understand themselves or scholarship in this way, and instead of being student-centered, some schools channel the scholar from the endowed lecture I attended as an undergraduate. They view discovery as their primary mission and the nurturing of students, especially undergraduate students, as a nuisance, perhaps merely as a necessary source of revenue, a way to keep the lights on. So I'll start with the proposition that as a Catholic university in the mold envisioned by John Henry Newman, Seattle University is a student-centered university. But what does it mean for Seattle University to be a university that's both progressive and Catholic? The juxtaposition of these two adjectives is startling. Some would say that it's a contradiction. To be progressive is to have one's eyes fixed on a brighter future. To be Catholic is, at least in part, to understand 2,000 years of tradition as a source of truth and wisdom. But it's at this knife's edge where these two perspectives meet that Seattle University has chosen to plant its flag. That seems like an unusual choice, maybe a slightly dangerous choice. I think to understand its deep wisdom, let me take a little bit of a detour and talk about the Cuban-born conceptual artist Felix Gonzalez Torres. Before there were NFTs, there was FGT. Gonzalez Torres' art pushes the limits of minimalism. This piece, for example, is called Portrait of Ross in LA. It consists of 175 pounds of hard candy, typically arranged in a corner. Felix Gonzalez Torres created it to honor his partner, Ross Laycock. 175 pounds was Ross's healthy weight. Patrons are encouraged to take pieces of candy home with them, and in so doing, they reenact over and over again Ross's gradual wasting away as he grew sick and died of AIDS. In 1990, Felix Gonzalez Torres created one of his most memorable works, Nowhere Better Than This Place, Somewhere Better Than This Place. This piece is a classic example of his minimalism. It consists of two neatly stacked piles of paper. On one pile appears the phrase, "Nowhere better than this place." On the other are printed the words, "Somewhere better than this place." Patrons are invited to take sheets from the piles to keep for themselves. The interaction between the audience and the art leads the piece to be in constant motion, with piles shrinking and then being replenished by the curator. What I find particularly fascinating about it is the conceptual labyrinth it seems to create. Which sheet do we take? Does choosing Nowhere Better suggest that we believe this place at this time is as good as it gets, that there's no room for improvement? If so, then choosing that page would seem to embody the self-satisfied affirmation of the complacent and the comfortable, an expression of pure privilege. In the midst of all the perfection and injustice that's plain to anyone with eyes to see, the decision seems simple, right? We need to set our sights on somewhere better than this place. But is that necessarily right? The poetry of Denise Levertov overflows with wonder at the world's beauty. A swan in the falling snow, the stillness of flowers, the sound of hail falling on stones in the early morning. She chastises visionaries who dream of colonies in space but who do not love the earth. And she even points an accusing finger at herself for allowing days to pass without remembering the most fundamental mystery of all, that there's anything at all, let alone the cosmos, joy, memory, everything, rather than the void. If we're forever pining for somewhere better, our eyes fixed on the endlessly receding horizon, we risk overlooking the goodness and beauty already present in the world all around us, flawed as it is. St. Ignatius of Loyola called ingratitude the most abominable of all sins because of its refusal to acknowledge the many benefits that we've already received. And if we fixate too narrowly on the possibility of somewhere better, we may fail to accept his invitation to seek God at work in all things. Sometimes people sort of toggle between the two extremes. Revolutionary movements, for example, start out by focusing single-mindedly on creating somewhere better by any means necessary. Once in power, however, they often come to believe that they've achieved perfection and that as a result, there can be nowhere better. And even the discussion of that possibility comes to be viewed as counter-revolutionary. And so all too often, they begin to repress political freedoms and devolve into the self-satisfaction of nowhere better. Which sheet do we choose? Felix Gonzalez Torres does not tell us, and yet his decision to make the piles the same size is perhaps suggestive of his perspective on the matter. To my mind, his piece challenges us to celebrate both ideas at once, to find a way to live in gratitude for the goodness that we've received without forsaking the indispensable and never-finished search for somewhere better. But in this Manichaean all-or-nothing moment in which we're living, simultaneously acknowledging value in the present, or even more controversially, in the past, while affirming our commitment to work for somewhere better, can feel like an impossibility. That uncomfortable but necessary tension between acknowledging what is good while at the same time longing for what might be better distills for me the challenge of Seattle University's vision that it should simultaneously be progressive and Catholic. In recent years, an insistence on tradition, on the notion that the past has all the answers, has seemed to dominate the public understanding of what it means to be a Catholic. And yet, as Pope Francis reminds us, the Catholic tradition has always sought to maintain a balance between a reverence for received wisdom and the recognition that the restless Spirit of God remains alive and in motion even today, seeking to set the world on fire and to inspire us with new ways to live out and deepen our understanding of enduring truths. It's therefore not altogether surprising that from the soil of this Catholic intellectual tradition has sprouted many potent and progressive ideas over the years, ideas that were once novel. Ideas like social justice, a term that was first coined by the Catholic Thomist Luigi Tabarelli in the mid-19th century, and which has been so forcefully elaborated in the social teaching of the Catholic Church in the 130 years since the publication of Rerum Novarum, New Things, in 1891. Coincidentally, in that same year, 1891, on September 27th, 130 years ago next week, in this remote corner of North America, on this eastern shore of the Salish Sea that we call home, a new thing came into being when two Jesuit priests celebrated the first Mass in the school that would become Seattle University. In the ensuing years, and as Father Steve observed in his own wonderful remarks, Seattle University has grown from a small Catholic college, largely by and for other Catholics, into a comprehensive university that engages with an increasingly secular society around us, a university that welcomes a diversity of people and ideas. And in so doing, Seattle University has become a cauldron of intellectual cross-fertilization and experimentation. And these developments, our increasing openness to a diversity of people and ideas and the increasing vitality of our academic culture are closely connected. Sustaining the kind of intellectual ferment that has led us to excel as a university has depended on our embrace of that diversity. And by this, I mean more than compositional diversity, although I surely mean that as well. But it has also depended on our embrace of a diversity of viewpoints and on our creation of an inclusive and supportive culture, both inside and outside the classroom, one that allows the full and fearless expression of our diversity. Universities have not always been hospitable to diversity. In the 20th century, many American universities excluded women or people of color. Many excluded Catholics and Jews and purged communists from their faculty ranks. Some continued to exclude LGBTQ people and gender nonconforming people, and even among those who do not actively exclude, many fail to create an environment that nurtures and sustains a sense of belonging by all. Today, the value of interacting across diverse identities and viewpoints is increasingly under assault from all directions, on campus and in our wider society. At Seattle University, we must recognize that diversity and the creation of an inclusive environment that allows diversity to express itself is at the very heart of our university's excellence. A university that is not diverse across multiple dimensions of identity and perspective, and that does not go beyond that diversity to establish a commitment to inclusion, belonging, and engagement, cannot credibly claim the mantle of excellence. We acknowledge that we still have a great deal of work to do, We need to increase the diversity of our faculty and our senior administration. We need to ensure the success of our diverse student body and sustain a campus culture in which students of all backgrounds and identities feel like equally valued members of our community. We need to welcome constructive engagement with people who hold different points of view. These are not distractions from our academic mission. They are essential to our ability to achieve it. But if we're true to our vision to be a progressive university community, is disagreement a sign of failure? Does welcoming a diversity of viewpoints suggest a lack of commitment to being a university that is truly progressive? In considering these questions, we need to first remember that our vision is to be a university that's progressive and Catholic. So it's no more the case that for Seattle University to be true to that vision, we must all be progressive than that we must all be Catholic, or that we must all be progressive or Catholic in precisely the same way. Nor do I need to remind you that progressives, full stop, disagree about a great deal. In fact, some might say that we are exceptionally good at disagreeing with one another. I've heard Seattle's contact sports version of politics sometimes described as the left versus the lefter. Progressives disagree about what somewhere better looks like. Is our goal radical economic equality or an end to radical inequality? Is our goal the freedom to choose one's gender expression or the rejection of gender as a meaningful category? Progressives disagree about how to prioritize among shared goals, about which goals should take precedence, or whether that's even possible. Must we address economic inequality in order to make meaningful progress on climate change, or is climate change an existential threat that takes precedence over all other issues? And of course, progressives vehemently disagree about means. How do we get to somewhere better? Would a tax on payrolls provide badly needed revenue to tackle challenges like housing affordability, or would it simply encourage employers to move to Bellevue? People who consider themselves progressives can disagree about answers to all these questions, many of which are questions of empirical fact that require rigorous investigation, the kind of relevant investigation at which Seattle University excels. At a more basic level, we will disagree about what it means to navigate this tension between our university's Catholic and progressive commitments. And so it should be clear that our vision of being a university that is innovative and progressive and Jesuit and Catholic is hardly a recipe for consensus. This observation comes as no surprise to anyone who has spent an appreciable amount of time at Seattle University. It is a feisty and unruly place. That's a feature, not a bug, because we're a university. A university characterized by consensus would not be one worthy of the name. But our status as a university also has some important implications for how we go about living out our mission, including how we should go about disagreeing. Ignacio Ellacuria, the former rector of the Jesuit University of Central America, delivered a commencement address at Santa Clara University in 1982, 7 years before he was murdered by a death squad in El Salvador. In that address, he spoke about how a Catholic university committed to justice should live out its mission. Central to his argument was the insistence that even when confronted with radical injustice, as he surely was, we need to respond to it as a university. Ellacuria recognized that university work is collective work, and essentially so. He insisted that as a university, we are an intellectual community, not a collection of isolated individuals. Among other things, the collective nature of our work means that our disagreements at a university should be accompanied by a mutual recognition of our shared participation in a common academic enterprise. As a result, those disagreements should be tempered by a commitment to collegiality. They should be characterized by the kind of intellectual charity and the spirit of generosity, what the Jesuits call presupposition, that sustains community even as we challenge one another. Ellacuria further insisted that as a university, we should confront the injustices we seek to defeat first and foremost as academics, by rigorously analyzing causes, by deepening our understanding of social mechanisms. Finally, and here perhaps echoing John Henry Newman a bit, Ellacuria argued that as a university, we should seek to bring a better world into being through our students. As a student-focused institution in the Jesuit model, it's our students, he said, who will be the immediate instruments of social transformation. Seattle University's mission statement therefore wisely commits us to empowering our students to become leaders for a just and humane world. Our mission of educating and empowering students means preparing them to lead, teaching them to question and to think, equipping them with the skills to persuade those with whom they disagree. And it means helping them to appreciate the beauty and the blessings in the world around us, even as we recognize its imperfections and injustices. To realize Seattle's bold ambition that there be nowhere better for students to grapple with society's great challenges, we have our work cut out for us. As we look to the future and consider what stands between our imperfect present and somewhere better, three great challenges loom. One is the existential threat of global climate change and ecological sustainability, which imperils our very survival. Seattle University, which this year will achieve Scope 2 carbon neutrality, needs to be at the forefront of the effort to develop new ways of thinking and living, which will require all of our creativity and intellectual rigor. A second grave challenge is the scourge of persistent racial injustice coupled with ever-widening economic inequality and other forms of social exclusion and subordination that threaten our sense of common purpose. The events of the past 18 months, particularly the protests in the wake of George Floyd's murder, have underscored the urgency of understanding and addressing the deep structures of injustice that we've inherited. If our multiracial, pluralist democracy is to survive, our students need to understand those structures so that as the leaders for a just and humane world, they can help to dismantle them. The third great challenge of our time is rapid technological transformation, the so-called Fourth Industrial Revolution, which promises exciting changes in our ways of interacting and doing business, but which also facilitates the spread of misinformation and extremism. No matter what field of study our students have chosen, from political science to computer science, they need to understand data and technology, not just in their technical dimensions, but through an interdisciplinary lens that includes their impact on human beings and our communities. Rapid technological change also opens doors to new pedagogical possibilities. Over the past 18 months, COVID has forced us to rethink the way that we educate our students. Some of the changes imposed on us by the pandemic are things we will be happy to leave behind. I've never taken to bumping elbows as a sign of greeting. And if I never attend another virtual cocktail party, it will be too soon. But some of the things we've learned during COVID have permanently expanded our capacity to reach students where and when they are. And in the coming months and years, Seattle University will take advantage of these new muscles to roll out programs of study, making use of hybrid online modalities that allow us to draw on our best of both in-person engagement and online flexibility, growing our graduate, professional, and executive education programs, and making them more accessible. In the new world that COVID has accelerated into being, our educational community will expand both spatially and temporally to include students in faraway places and in different stages of life. But as with everything we do, we will undertake these efforts with a firm commitment to our Jesuit approach to deeply engaging with and educating the whole person, reconciling faith with reason, and inculcating in our students not just knowledge, but wisdom. As we return this fall to on-campus instruction, we will draw upon these lessons and reignite Seattle University's strategic directions process. We will launch working groups aimed at moving forward on the 5 goals that Seattle University has identified for itself. These groups will be charged with reimagining an interdisciplinary curriculum in order to prepare our students to engage with the 3 great challenges of our time, enhancing the student experience inside and outside the classroom, investing in professional formation for members of our community, promoting inclusive excellence, and creating the conditions for institutional growth and innovation. And we will approach all of these efforts from a foundational affirmation of our Jesuit and Catholic character. We will live up to our promise to be a student-centered university that welcomes people of all backgrounds and identities, that cares for our students as whole persons, attending not only to their intellectual well-being, but to their spiritual, physical, and moral development. As I said, we have our work cut out for us. But like Borges's infinite labyrinth, the work of a university, the work of educating our students, striving to prepare them to lead to a more just and humane world, is never accomplished. At universities around the world, that work has been going on in different ways for 1,000 years. Here at Seattle University, as Father Steve pointed out, we are relative newcomers, carrying on that tradition in our distinctive way in this outpost of the Pacific Northwest for a mere 130 years. As Seattle University's 22nd president, I am committed to stewarding our unique approach to the academic enterprise, ensuring that our bold ambition to become a university that is simultaneously innovative and progressive and Jesuit and Catholic is not a cul-de-sac that turns in on itself, ultimately leading nowhere, but instead remains an ever-widening labyrinth within a labyrinth, one that encompasses the past and the future, and even implies the stars. I'm committed to looking hopefully to the future, even while giving thanks for the blessings that we've inherited from the past. And I will work tirelessly to ensure that for Seattle University's second 130 years, there will be nowhere better than this place to imagine somewhere better than this place. Thank you.